All right, my name is Mike Vovk. I'm with Deloitte, and I'm hosting a panel on everything media for the masses, which sort of is a catch-all phrase. We're gonna talk about broadcast, a little bit streaming, cloud, sort of next generation of where we see all that going. So with me is Tom Carlisle from Diversified. We've got Richard Duke from Avid. We've got Kiran Patel from AWS. And we've got André Rievers from OpenDrives. And André, how many Emmys? Three.
Three.
Right. Okay, so there you go. I have none, so just to be clear. All right, so we're going to open up with a question about cloud. So cloud computing models and flex models have been around for, I think I started dabbling with it 15 or so years ago, and they've been mainly focused, primarily starting out with retail and some other industries that were a little bit more akin to leveraging that model and a little bit easier to dive into it. Broadcast and live streaming in general has been a laggard for cloud adoption for obvious reasons that a lot of us know about here, right? Latency is an issue, live broadcast is an issue. Some of those things, it's interesting. We've just started overcoming, so we're seeing some of that happening in the cloud, and I'm sure our friend from AWS is going to talk a lot about that today. But one of the questions I have is, now we have some unique challenges and some headwinds with cloud adoption and media supply chain, and where do you think we are today, and what things do we still need to work on, or so what is the priority of what we have to address in order to get more and more of that adoption going? Kiran?
Me?
Yeah.
I think you're right with the slowing down of adoption, but I think the broadcast side is what's catching up. I think the streaming side now, it's almost taken for granted. It makes sense to have that in the cloud. I think the broadcast side's coming in and getting the content into the cloud as early as possible, and then being able to take advantage of what the cloud infrastructure gives you, I think is where that adoption is going to rise. I think that's across the board, like from a live production point of view, that's harder. From a content production point of view, again, that's been easier because you can store your files there. There was a phrase that AWS used a while back, like the data has gravity or storage has gravity. Right. You've got your content there, you're going to use more of it, and that's where you want to put it. Stop as in if you've got stuff stored on premises, the first challenge tends to be that needs to move into the cloud to start using it. And I think the same is going to be true across the board from a video workflow. The source content is in the cloud. If your live streams can get into the cloud quickly, that lets you adopt and start using some of the benefits of the cloud faster.
Okay. Tom?
Well, you talked about media, about where it started with sales and these businesses, retail and all that. They didn't have a problem with losing a commercial. Like the reason we do the work we do is because we're putting commercials around programming. We're trying to get those things on air. We're trying to make revenue for our companies. What we're looking at on the cost side, the biggest issue that we face is, what does it really cost for us to do production in the cloud? The biggest issues we have right now is we really don't know on every facet to give you a straight answer. So what we have to do is sit back and try to understand what your workflow looks like. How are you going to go out and do? What are you trying to achieve with the cloud? And we have to step back and say, let's do some POCs. Let's see what we can do. Let's try to figure out how to get you a number that makes sense to what your workflow is going to look like. One of the biggest things that we're trying to do is do the workflow ahead of time before we start engaging with the customer so that we can answer a lot of questions ahead of time. We want to be able to say, okay, we've done this workflow. We have a catalog of things in our pocket that we can present to you and say, okay, do you like vendor A versus vendor B? What are you using in your production facility now? And then how can we tailor workflows around you that work really well to define what you're trying to do and how you're going to define and make revenue off of your investment?
Yeah, I mean, that interesting point. Something that I often hear is, and I think we heard it on a panel I heard today, I actually said, just because we can do it doesn't mean we should, right? So lots of things you can do in the cloud, lots of things we're going to see increasing need for some of that and increasing offerings in the cloud. But we need to be careful in how we adopt that, right? Because we have a very unique set of requirements in the broadcast space, and we need to be careful in how we adopt that. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to what Tom said. I think it's, initial concerns from the cloud in terms of, security or reliability, cost management, some of those still exist, but to a lesser extent. Now that we see that the cloud is inevitable and what the cloud has to offer in terms of creativity and how it affects your content strategy and your ROI, we are more focused, I feel, on cost management, right? We need to focus on cost management tools. And in order to have this conversation as to how is it that this applies to tier one broadcasting versus smaller shops, we really need to focus on the preparation, because the ecosystem is so large and there's a differentiation. I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes people have a hard time differentiating between the cloud provider and the cloud solutions that support them. So what we need to do is really focus on, in order to address cost management, it starts with identifying the variables of your operation and preparing for them, right? We have to look ahead. I would imagine that, Tom, with Diversified, this is what you need. You need a system integrator that can actually put this puzzle together and present you with all the options. Long gone are the days that I come from as a content creator, where I was focused on the traditional mindset of content creation, where like my storage needed to be local, needed to be preferably within sight with the biggest fiber pipe that I could get, right? You talk about cloud, a few years ago, and I would call you crazy. I didn't want that, but now it's inevitable because we know that what the cloud does in terms of the global proliferation of content and cultural relevance, right? So it's really unstoppable. But in order to address it, we need to prepare for it. And I think that that's the step that's missing.
Yeah, one of the big drivers I constantly hear is if you get your content in the cloud, there's a lot of things you can do that are ancillary in the cloud that are cost prohibitive to build on your own on-prem. So there's a lot of additional benefits that you can garner from being in the cloud. 100%. So as we look at costs, we've got an ecosystem of vendors that champion a legacy workflow on-prem, right? And that ecosystem of vendors, some are already in the cloud, some have cloud capability, some maybe not so much, right? So where do we need to go as an industry from a vendor perspective to really someday see, because maybe I'm the one that hasn't seen it, is a complete, robust, scalable supply chain in the cloud that is scalable and cost effective, and that we can rely on, and that's consistent. Richard, your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's an interesting piece. With the cloud, we almost started from the end, right, and started moving backwards, right? With streaming, you distributed in the cloud, but you didn't produce that content in the cloud. And now we're starting to move backwards through the production cycle. And then we went through this period of time where it was all about burst, right? I have all this technology on-prem, but I don't have enough, and so I'm going to burst to the cloud when I need it, right? And keep everything else on-prem. But you're exactly right. What we want to see, what really makes it cost-effective, is when you can actually utilize the cloud all the way across, right? Get the content into the cloud, and the speed and efficiency of being able to produce your content from the beginning and keep it in the cloud all the way through distribution. Really, you save a lot of time, which ends up saving a lot of money.
Don?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we are still thinking about a workflow where we're putting things up, we're doing something to them, we're bringing it back down. We need to move away from that at some point. And this is where we start talking about reinventing workflows in our industry. This can go for media supply chain, this can go for live production, this can go for whatever you want to do. If we keep moving things up and down like a pogo stick, we're not going in the right direction. We need to take the camera, and from that point where the camera is being captured, move that up to the cloud, capture it there, and work that entire linear workflow, and then out of the cloud to your CDN and endpoint. The same thing goes is in there. If we look at the entire supply chain, we talk about media supply chain as being one piece, live production as being a piece. Really, it's a full linear ecosystem. A producer puts a slug in a rundown. The rundown does a whole lot of things downstream. It can do things at master control and at production control, all the way through the workflow. But you also have to look at the fact that media went up there, and I now want to automate how that workflow goes, and I've cut clips now in a replay service, and I now want to put that clip and move it to social media. Well, I didn't have to bring it back down. I did it directly in the cloud. I edited it, I cut it, I put it together, I pushed it off to YouTube or whatever platform you happen to be doing your social media on. Same thing goes with your end delivery chain to CDN. It's got to be one linear workflow. And right now, I understand a lot of people have a lot of legacy technology that they're working on. But in the next 3 to 5 years, and this is something we'll talk about later, we're going to see less and less of that infrastructure on-prem and more of it be virtualized. And a lot of that has to do with the ability to scale quickly, to scale out and scale up on your infrastructure. And if you don't move there now, you're going to be building it on-prem in your own environments, and that can be very expensive as well. So we have to look at what those costs look like.
You and I had a previous conversation about, what do customers and people in this space need to think about, and what do they need to build today, right? And be sort of future-proofing or build into the future, because quite frankly, they're not going to build this for you're going to build it once, you're going to run it for a long time, right? So what are the types of things that you have to do to make sure that you don't carry a lot of technical debt too soon, and you can carry this into the future? What are the things that
well,
think about?
When we develop things, we're not developing solutions for a TD who's working today. We're developing a solution for a TD in 5 years or in 2 years or in 3 years. We have to look at reinventing workflows that we've traditionally had over the last 20, 25, 30 years of how that supply chain of a camera signal goes through a production environment and out to broadcast. And we have to start thinking about the ways other people are monetizing and doing work. Esports was a really early adopter of cloud workflows. And now we're going back and reinventing some of those cloud workflows because the vendors are now making products that are so much more advanced than they were even 2 years ago. And I hate to say, the pandemic was a bad thing, but in our industry, it did accelerate us and force us to figure out new ways to work and do really powerful things. So,
Andres?
Because before, I'm sorry.
No, I'll go there and then here.
Okay. Before I was with OpenDrives, I was head of post-production for Activision Blizzard Esports. And Tom just touched on something that's very, very true. Everybody was talking about the cloud, and we were just sort of evaluating, but I was still in that mindset of, the traditional, data is stationary. No, data moves. It's constantly moving now. And then the pandemic hit. And then we had to reassess everything in order to protect the content and to protect the integrity of the league. So the priorities changed because we needed to focus on the integrity of the competition, on the bandwidth, on security, right? So in order to do that, we needed to scale back on the broadcast. We needed to reinvent how we were going to address broadcast. So from that perspective, we stopped being that tier one environment and started adapting to the negative disruption of COVID. So instead of using EVS or Grass Valley or these robust solutions and 2 petabytes of storage on-prem, we started looking at the cloud and we started opting for vMix or OBS and software-based solutions that are a little bit more cost-effective that still addressed the needs for the content and for the broadcast, but considering the shift in priority for the integrity of the competition first. So that was a huge push for us. So, for the esports industry sort of like led the way, right? Because esports also coming from a digital nature, it's easier.
Richard?
So the fascinating thing is the idea of collaboration, right? And it used to be that in order to collaborate, we all had to be in the same space. We all had to be in the same room or the same building, right? And you had these great teams that were wonderful at collaborating. But now we have the option of collaborating with people that might be 10 miles away or 1,000 miles away. Yeah. And the world has become smaller because we can interact with content. And so we see people making different choices, right? We see in the filmmaking world, you don't have to choose an editor that lives in that city. You could actually shoot in London and edit in Los Angeles or edit in Atlanta, and you can shoot in London and Atlanta and Los Angeles and edit in Tokyo, right? Your people don't have to be in the same city that you're creating content, right? And one of the things that we see that is very unique is kids understand this, right? You see high school kids that are putting together a song, and they're writing a song, and it used to be, hey, who's my buddy that plays guitar, and who's my buddy that plays drums, right? And now they just put out a post and said, hey, I need somebody that plays guitar. And another kid that's 2,000 miles away say, I'll play guitar on your song. And another kid says, I'll play drums on your song. And all of a sudden they're interacting. They've never met each other. They're thousands of miles apart or hundreds of miles apart. And all of a sudden they're building a song together, right? And they think about it in that space, that it doesn't have to be the kid that I know. Yeah. It doesn't have to be my friend down the street. It could be somebody on the other side of the planet.
That kind of collaboration that you just mentioned, I think that's really what revolutionized everything, because it also, like using this example of different people contributing in one song, there's also an element of cultural relevance there.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful because it broadens the reach, and then your content strategy becomes stronger, right? Because you have a larger footprint. So that's a wonderful point. Yeah.
Tom, do you want to?
Oh, I was just, it's decentralized production, right? Do you want the best operator that's available in town today, or do you want the best operator in the country that's available today to work on your production? That is extremely powerful, to be able to go and build the best production team you can. And in our live production, especially Tier 1 sports, I have a bunch of friends in the audience who are all very good Tier 1 operators. They all know each other. They've worked together for decades. If one of them is in St. Louis and the other one's in Burbank, and they're working together on a production, it doesn't matter if they're in the same room, they still know what the other person does and what their strengths are. And it allows us, this is something that came up earlier when we were talking about production in a different conversation, it lowers your costs, so you're not flying people around, you're not doing all the work. And we keep on rehashing the same story. It is true, that does save you money by not putting people on a plane.
So appreciate that. I want to get to our friend from AWS here. So one of the things that we keep seeing is sort of the proliferation of content providers, right? Everybody with a cell phone. One thing we like to say in my media solutions group at Deloitte is everybody's a media company, they just don't know it yet. So outside of the Tier 1 providers, you've got a lot of the content providers is like, I picture it like two brooms, right? That are just, you've got the heads of each broom on either end. You've got tons of content coming in, it's growing, and then you've got all these formats that are playing over here on the right side. You still may have a media supply chain in the middle, but you've got just this plethora of, everybody is generating content. I've got teens and 20s as kids, and they don't watch same things I watch. They watch little TikTok videos and streaming videos and things like that from people that I've never heard of. So my question, I'll get to it in a minute, is if I'm looking at AWS and I'm looking at, this is the direction we're going. We're going to a cloud platform, right? In media broadcast. And we're looking at the proliferation of content providers. Everybody's a content provider. How does AWS think about that? What should I look at for my cloud provider?
Well, I think we tend to work back, so it's like depending on what the customer requirements are. So that's the thing from the topics, like if it's a smaller medium, obviously we're supporting some of the biggest customers, and that's not necessarily easy, but they have complex requirements, they can have a long lead time, so we work to build almost like a custom thing for them. But the original story, or one of the kind of the famous quotes from Andy Jassy with AWS is like, it looks at the undifferentiated heavy lifting. It's just like, what can we do that everybody needs and we can just provide it, because that's not going to be the unique thing. So it tends to be, like aside from like Prime Video's doing the content creation, but we as AWS are going to be like, we can do the file transcoding, because if we do a really good job on that, you're, again, focusing on the content. You don't have to worry about the file transcoding. We can do the storage, we can do the networking, we can do the compute, all of that works. And where the other kind of common term is like, it kind of democratizes that across the board, depending on which part of the video supply chain you're looking at. If that's in content production, it means you can be using you have the option to use the same software and special effects and workstations that are doing like rings of power. For a small company, can be using it for 2 hours at a time. If you want to stream your kids' high school basketball game, You could be running it on the same infrastructure that does the Super Bowl, but you're just running it for a couple of hours at the time. You get access to all of this and then can almost kind of do a pick and mix. Like build it yourself if you need to, depending on the kind of expertise or the appetite to do development work. You can be taking solutions we've built to build it yourself. You can use the services that make it slightly easier. There's a huge partner ecosystem that will build on AWS for you, so you get the advantages of that cloud platform, but have someone that's an expert at building a video workflow on AWS do that for you.
And it's interesting, and that dovetails into my next question. If we're seeing that democratization, we're seeing everybody just sort of leveraging a supply chain, wanting to distribute content. I've had a couple conversations with some tier one providers about this concept of broadcast as a service, right? Turning a cost center into a profit center. Saying, listen, if I've got this giant supply chain, I've spent a lot of money on developing it, I'm a tier one provider, am I going to offer that to the masses to leverage a supply chain to distribute anybody's content, for a service, for a fee? Do we see that happening at a tier one provider or tier two, or do we see that happening at AWS? Is that something that we're going to see come up?
And on that, I think, we've seen, examples of people that are doing that, and Amazon.com is probably one. They built the website and the infrastructure to build the website and then realized that we're really good at doing this kind of background stuff. We could sell that, and that became AWS. And we've had others. So one of the services I look after is like Twitch is built off of an entire platform, and now we've got a service, Amazon IVS, that lets you do the video bit. They know how to do it. They let you offer that side of it, so you can do live streaming, but you don't have to put it on the platform. And there are customers or partners of ours that are doing the same. The Arch platform, which is built kind of by the Washington Post team, they knew how to do it really well and realized that there's a business model of saying, we can do the layer of the live streaming things for you as a partner, because they've done all the complex stuff for building it on AWS, and now they can offer it as a service instead. So people that maybe don't have the software development team that Washington Post had can just use, have X as a service provided to them.
Yeah, if you're successful, then Tom, you and I can go retire because we'll be out of business. We don't have to build this stuff anymore. People can just, click and buy it themselves. One of the things that I do hear from time to time from people that leverage the cloud for pieces of the media supply chain and some of the critical broadcast functions. Those of us that have been in broadcast for a while understand the SLA nature of that type of function is extreme, right? That has SLAs that go well beyond, trying to click through a shopping box for a retail function. So, and I understand, if you read, I'm not picking on AWS, but if you read any public cloud providers' SLAs, they're generic, they're for multiple industries, and they don't necessarily fit that model, right? How you combat that is you put protection around it. You build redundancy around it, right? And theoretically, costs go up as a result, right? How do you address that?
So it kind of arcing back to that cost conversation, there's a level of it can get out of control, but you can always there's a conversation I think on what is good enough, what's the level of resilience you need, and you could always pay more. And then it's again, if it's a smaller or medium company wanting to get into the cloud and not one of the big tier one broadcasters, for them, they absolutely don't even want a black frame. So they'll have to architect in a way, and that will do that, but complexity and cost will probably go up. You could just have an EC2 instance running FFmpeg, and then you're taking on all the complexity, and if that instance goes down, your stream goes down. So you're it's probably the cheapest way to do it, but definitely not the best way to do it. And then you've got services that will kind of help manage that. But even those you can architect in a way to kind of say, do we want the equivalent of running across 2 data centers? Do we want the equivalent of running across 4 data centers? Do we want it geographically diverse? So the options are there to build it as highly available and resilient as you need. And then layering on top of that is what's the recovery time? Do you want it to have a glitch when it fails over? Is a couple of seconds of black okay before it figures things out? And a lot of the internal systems are designed in a way, it's the change from moving just what's built on-prem into the cloud. You design for the cloud. So if there's a failure, ideally, your viewers don't even notice.
I appreciate that. The two arguments that keep coming up, today, and maybe they'll go away because, look, we used to talk about security nonstop, 24 hours a day, 10 years ago. Now it comes up less often, although it's still a topic of discussion. But maybe that'll get better. Maybe cost will get better. Of course, with technology over time, that's always a facet of any technology that you look at, and it'll just get better. I mean, I think we've heard that theme from discussion to discussion. We've got about 4 minutes left. I want to hit on a couple more topics. One is I don't think I've ever had a conversation in the last 6 months that didn't actually hit on AI in some form or function, and I think we've had 2 or 3 panels hit on it. But if we talk about AI maybe for the tier 2 or tier 3 folks, right? Do we see that AI is going to kind of come up from those folks and push the industry up into the tier 1 providers? Or do we see that adoption is going to come from sort of the top down? I mean, how do you view AI in that, in the lens of media for the masses, in the lens of streaming and broadcast functions?
Me?
Sure.
Okay. Well, AI, it's a big buzzword we have going right now. Vendors are going to build AI into their products, and that AI is going to help their products do things better, quicker, faster. We saw, if you were in one of the other breakout sessions earlier today, you saw some use of AI for creating original video. You've seen AI for modifying the video you have, like extending it out and adding frames into the sides. If you're going from a 1080 by 1920, but you want to make it 1920 by 1080 video, so going from vertical to horizontal. There's a lot of tools out there to be able to pull metadata out of it. There's a lot of tools to actually add metadata into your streams as well. So you can go through and say you're clipping video in a replay scenario. Your replay operator might not put every bit of data that's in that frame of video, so when you need to search it later by your producer, they can type in, I want to see where number 88 was on the 20-yard line every time that they were there, and then every frame of video that came up with number 88 on the field at the 20-yard line pops up. There's different ways of searching for this. So these are things that are going to be built into our products moving forward.
Appreciate that. We've got about 2.5 minutes left, and I'm going to do a quick one round down the row here. We're gonna go this way.
Okay. Fine.
All right. That's all right, Tom. If we were sitting up here 2 years from now, right, and having a relevant discussion about some topic around this framework, what do you think that topic would be? Where do you think we're going in 2 years down the road? Somebody asked me to put together a 5-year roadmap. I told them I'll probably be flying something to work by then. I don't know what that looks like.
For me, 2 years down the road, it'll be, wow, it was so funny how we used to talk about how we wanted to have this hybrid infrastructure, and that we've really started moving a lot of our infrastructure to the cloud, and that more and more of our infrastructure is not being done in a box that you buy off the shelf, or maybe it is a box you buy off the shelf, but it's not a custom-built box by a vendor. It's software that you're buying and licensing moving forward.
So it used to be why cloud, then now it's why not cloud, and then two years from now it's going to be there.
So I think it's an interesting thing, if you go back 5 or 7 years, right, pre-pandemic, there were a lot of people that were almost afraid to use the cloud, right? And they were afraid to use AI. They were afraid to talk about those things because of, concerns of security and things like that, security cost, et cetera. The pandemic forced some things to be adopted, right? And the cloud adoption particularly just was revolutionized during the pandemic. I hope in the next 2 years we're not going through that again. But my sense is that we will see radical adoption of AI in media supply chain over the next 2 years.
So we will need to be talking about cloud.
And it will not be just it will be at all layers. There will be people who make AI content and make millions of dollars on it. And there will be enterprises who adopt AI for the use of all of the different things that it can do. And it will be used at every different layer in the supply chain.
Kiran, we got 30 seconds. I'm being looked at.
Big explosion of content, I think. For one, from a content production point of view, the quality bar, and actually live production as well. Because if we can get live production into the cloud, we can cover more things because you're not having to drive a truck there.
Fair enough. Andres?
I think everything that they just said, plus the fact that I think that the disruption of AI, not only on the creative side, but also on the cost monitoring side. Yeah. But what we're going to see inevitably is that all of these solutions are going to, the solution providers, much like OpenDrives, we need to be of an adaptive nature in everything that we create because of the reactive nature of these workflows, right? And having a conversation with a colleague of mine, he actually made an interesting reference where he said, you know, Dre, it's like that film Buckaroo Banzai. Wherever you go, there you are. So, that's it.
Well, thank you very much. Round of applause for the panelists. Thank you. All righty, thank you.